Now we'll see how we can connect our VS Code or Visual Studio Code to the remote dev VM, which we just now have created, and build apps inside that from my local Windows machine, right? Remember, the virtual machine is in Azure, and I am working from a Windows 10 laptop, which has got a Visual Studio Code. So let's see how that can be achieved. So this is my Visual Studio Code locally running on Windows, okay? And I need one very important extension to work against this remote machine is remote SSH. If I do that, you will find that remote SSH is already installed in my local machine. It is, though it is in preview, so it's a bit bumpy, but it works most of the time. So it is from Microsoft, and there are already over 3 million download which has happened. So you can use this extension, and it's freely available with you to connect to the machine which is in Azure. So to do that, first let me copy the uh, public IP address. Okay, and to get the public IP address of the newly created VM, you can either go to Azure portal or you can use the Azure CLI to get them. So this is the public IP address of my virtual machine. So now if I go to my remote desktop and then I open up the command palette, which is via one small command, that is Control Shift P. So if you're working with Visual Studio Code, this should be part of your muscle memory, right? You will never forget about it, right? So let's just use that Control Shift P, and then it shows up the command palette. And here you just type remote, and it'll show you what all remote options you have. And one of them is uh, connect to the host. Okay, so let me pick up that, and then I say add a new SSH. Now, what was the IP address I copied? It is 199. So I add a new SSH host. I say that, and then you say SSH and provide the username and the IP address just like you did that, and you add it to a file. That is my local Windows machine, and then I say connect. Now what happens when I click the connect? It will ask me what is the operating system you're trying to connect. So it is obviously a Linux machine. And then are you sure you want to continue? Yes, I'm sure I want to continue. And here is the password I need to provide. If I enter the password correct, it should now tell me that, hey, I'm connected. And the status bar, you will find the IP address is showing up. So you can see that in the green bar below, at the bottom of this window, in the top left bottom, you will find SSH online. So I am now connected. Now I can pretty much go into the file system and open a folder from here, right? You can see that I can see all the folders, etc. Right? So let me just go ahead and go to the terminal, and it will be the bash terminal, right? Now you can see that this is also like Windows Terminal, but it is inside Visual Studio Code. Now I can check the folder which I am in. So if I'm in this, and I can say make dir GA 2021, let me create a folder and then go to that folder, and then I can check if my .NET still working. It is still working. Then I can say .NET new MVC. Let me create an MVC app and then give sample web, and then I say that I do not want to have it HTTPS. So I'll say HTTPS, and that should go ahead and kickstart the application creation, right? So I haven't yet connected to a folder, but I will go ahead and connect to this folder. And this essentially will create a folder called sample web. So you will find that folder here, sample web. If I go into sample web. I am inside that and I find all the files, etc. So I go inside that sample web folder. Let me go there, and I have that newly created folder showing up, and I go say sample web, and I open this in my Visual Studio Code. Now what happens, this Visual Studio opens a folder just like a local folder. Now let me also insert that password. If I enter the password, what happens, it allows me to look into that. Now, a couple of things you need to remember. If you're using password, it might prompt you again and again. That's why SSH is better. But I prefer to enter the password because I do not have to carry any luggage. And then the extension which I shared with you, none of these extensions are available in this machine because it is just now created. So if you go here and see that, it will ask you to install all the extension which this machine uses. For example, if I am using Docker, so it will ask you to install that Docker into that remote machine, right? So if I'm using C Sharp, that's the programming language extension, you can see it asked me to install in the remote machine. So sitting from my Windows, I can go ahead and install all the required extensions I may need for my application. So you can see that this is quite convenient, right? Now, once these extensions, etc., are kind of done, right? So you can see that you have got all the files, etc., created, absolutely fine. You want to test it, go into the terminal, new terminal, and it shows in the sample web. And if I say .NET build, and does it build properly without any problem, it'll restore all the dependencies from NuGet package and then build my application. And if there is no error, it'll be successfully building that application, putting the DLL into bin folder, right? So that's what it's gonna do. So that's absolutely fine. I have no issue in terms of getting it built, right? So the build is happening fine. Now, one of the things I want to do, because I'm talking about container, I want to containerize this application. There are a couple of ways by which we can do it. So let's pick up the easiest way, and then I will explain you other options you can have. Now, what you can do is that you can basically first add one small thing as a task. So if I say task, run build task, let me add the task here, configure the task. I'll add it to task JSON .NET Core because I'm building a .NET Core application, and task is added. So let me close it. Nothing else required. You can also use something like a Docker, and it says that add Docker file to workspace. Sometime it may or may not work. It is bumpy again at times, right? So you can say that I want to use port 80, and I'll say no, and it works. If it doesn't work, right, due to any reason, you can just handwrite the Docker file by referencing some external thing and then create it. But if it works, that's absolutely fine. Life is simple, right? You can just go ahead and see that this basically takes the .NET 3.3.1 image from the image repository, compiles it, right? Restore the package, goes to this project file, and then builds the project and runs this CLI inside that container. Now, because the Docker file is available within the same folder as my project file is, I can run few command, right? Let us try to run some command. Now, to run some Docker command, which basically can help you build the Docker image, what you can do, you can basically go ahead and build the Docker image. And to build the Docker image, one of the simplest command is that Docker build minus dot, which means that you're gonna build this project, which is a CS proj and the Docker file in the same folder. and you just run it, and it'll download those image, um, run those tasks one by one, all the tasks. So there are 17 tasks here, right? So steps, you can see that there will be steps executed one by one. And once all of the steps are kind of done, right, you can basically go ahead and get the Docker file created. Now, one of the things I need is that I need to have a registry to push this Docker file to. Now, what I wanted to do here is that I want to use some public registry, which is available to everyone without really um, having anything special about it. So let me go ahead and then show you how we can have a public registry. So if you go to docker.io, right, that's the environment, and then I just go ahead and sign in. Anybody can go ahead and sign in here for free, right? So hub.docker.com will ask you to log in, and then you give the login password, right? So you can see that it is already kind of there. So I created that. Let me create a repository saying that GA21, 21, and then it's gonna go ahead and have a repository like that. Global Azure 2021 demo. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go ahead and create it. Now, once I create it, right, it's going to give me this name, right? That's the format of the image. I have to create an image using this format. So what I need to do is that I need to run this Docker build command, which generates an image with that format. Now, what happens when you run this simple build is that it gets image. So if I Docker images, you'll find that the image is kind of built, but they are not having any name or the tag. So I need to give that name or the tag. And to do that, you can also retag an existing image or rebuild the thing. So let's see the rebuild option. That's how you should be building the Docker. So build, so definitely Docker build, and -t is where you specify that. And then you say, let's say latest. That becomes your Docker image tag, and then you put a dot, and that will run this exact same step. And if you now run Docker images, you'll find the newly created images available. One of the good things about this is that you remember that I logged in to my Docker Hub using Docker login. If you haven't done it, you can just simply run Docker login, and it'll prompt you username and password. You provide that. You should be in that Docker Hub, which I showed in that portal. And then you can push this image, right? So if you say Docker images, you have that image available, right? And here is the name of the image, right, with latest. Now, if you say Docker push and then the image name with the tag, what happens at the background is it's gonna go ahead and add the image over here. Right now, there is no image, right? So you can see that it basically is blank. So if I just refresh it, it still shows nothing, because it just now have created, nothing is being pushed, right? So if we run this docker push and whatever the command the image name you have specified, it will push to this. Now remember one thing, the tag name should match with the repository name. That's the only trick here. Now if you do that push, it basically is going to push your local container which holds your code and the instruction and the entry point, etc., into the Docker Hub, right? You can see that it's pushed, right, already. And then if you come over here and let's say refresh this window, it's gonna go ahead and then show you the image is now available. And now using this image, you'll be able to spin up a new container, and then you can actually run those containers either locally or in Azure or anywhere else. That's what we'll see in our next step, that how we can use this image to create a container in many different ways. right? So what we have seen is that we have created a simple ASP.NET application by connecting our Visual Studio to the remote machine, and then have the Docker file added through extension, and then push that into a Docker Hub. That is the public registry available. And then using that public registry, we basically gonna go ahead and then kind of um, um, push that image. So basically you can push it anywhere you have access to. So we'll see a couple of different other options also. Okay, so with this, I want to end the demo and thank you very much for patiently watching, and we'll come back in our next one.